The stars did not welcome us. We were born in the screaming silence between them, scavengers picking through the bones of our own shattered cradle. Earth was a memory, a ghost haunting the history logs. But humanity endured. We endured in the kilometer-long hull of the HCS Vengeance, a ship that was never meant to be a warship. She had been the Odyssey, a colony vessel designed to carry the last seeds of our species to a new home, a testament to a hope that had died centuries ago. Now, her hydroponic bays were converted to munitions factories, her science labs retrofitted for advanced sensor analysis, and her hull was a patchwork quilt of scavenged armor plating. She was ugly, scarred, and old. But she was ours, and she, like us, had learned that survival was a far more practical god than hope. I was Captain Eva Rostova, and the Vengeance was Mary Parrish. I had earned her command not in a pristine academy, but in the blood and vacuum of the Unification Wars, the brutal internal conflicts that had forged the scattered remnants of humanity into a single, paranoid fist. We were the last bastion, the final remnant of a species that had looked at the abyss and refused to blink. My first officer, Commander Jan Lee, stood beside me on the command deck, his face a mask of disciplined cynicism. The bridge was dark, illuminated only by the soft, crimson glow of combat alerts and the endless tapestry of stars visible through the main view screen. "Status," I said, my voice a low rasp that felt more at home in the ship's grating machinery than in a human throat. Jan's eyes didn't leave the tactical display. Holding position at the edge of the Oort cloud. Long-range scans are still picking up the signal. It's non-human. Confirmed. A repeating loop. Low power. Looks like a distress call. He paused, a flicker of something almost like curiosity in his usually guarded expression. The linguistic algorithm has a partial translation. It's poetic. It speaks of a fading light and a silent song. I snorted, the sound dry and humorless. Poetry doesn't survive out here. Run a threat analysis. Assume it's a lure. Check for ghost signals, gravitic anomalies, anything that suggests a predator waiting for us to investigate the bait. We had learned that lesson the hard way. The first time we encountered an alien signal, the Keeler Echo. It had been a message of peace, a beautiful, complex mathematical sequence that promised knowledge. The probe that carried it also carried a tailored retrovirus that nearly wiped out the fledgling Mars colony. We learned then that the universe didn't send messengers. It sent weapons wrapped in pretty paper. For 3 days, we watched the signal. It never changed. A faint, desperate pulse in the overwhelming emptiness. It came from a single source, a ship drifting in the void just beyond the heliopause. Our deep-range scan showed it was damaged. Venting atmosphere, its power signature fluctuating wildly. It was small, elegant, and looked more like a piece of sculpted coral than a starship. There were no other contacts, no hidden fleets, nothing. Just a dying ship crying for help. They call themselves the Coral, Gian reported on the 4th day, handing me a data slate. The translation is clearer now. They are refugees. They speak of an empire, a force they call the Luminocracy, that has consumed their home system. They're fleeing, and they're broken. I read the fragmented message. It was filled with sorrow, a lament for a lost world. It didn't ask for war or vengeance. It asked for sanctuary. A ship full of refugees. I mused. the words feeling foreign and strange on my tongue. We haven't had refugees since the fall of EO Station, and those were our own people. Jian's gaze was hard, and we still spaced half of them because we couldn't spare the resources. This is a trick. Ava. It has to be. Maybe. I conceded. Or maybe, for the first time, we've encountered something other than a monster. I looked at the ship's emblem on my sleeve, the stylized phoenix rising from flames that was the symbol of the human coalition. We had risen from our own ashes, clawing our way back from the brink. We knew what it was to be broken, to be the last of your kind. The thought sat uneasily in my gut, a dangerous seed of empathy in the barren soil of my pragmatism. Against Jian's strenuous objections, I made a decision. We wouldn't approach, not yet, but we would open a channel. We sent a simple coded message, a sequence of prime numbers, the universal greeting of a species capable of reason. The response was immediate. It wasn't numbers. It was music. A harmony so complex and beautiful it sent a shiver down my spine. Our systems translated it into a cascade of images and emotions, gratitude, relief, and a profound, soul-deep weariness. The choral, their message conveyed, were a species that communicated through song. They were artists, not warriors. And they were dying. They offered a trade. If we gave them shelter, a place to repair their ship and rest, they would give us their most prized possession, the Echo. It was a piece of technology, they explained, a device that could mask a system, hide it from detection by creating a false gravitic signature, a ghost in the machine of space-time. To a species like ours, living in constant fear of discovery, it was the Holy Grail. But with the offer came a warning, a discordant note in their symphony of desperation. They told us of the luminocracy. They weren't conquerors in the traditional sense. They didn't arrive with warships and cannons. They arrived with cathedrals. Massive vessels that broadcast a signal, a psychic frequency they called the Hymn of Union. It promised an end to conflict, to pain, to individuality. It offered a blissful, mindless peace, an absorption into a collective consciousness where dissent was impossible because the very concept of self was erased. They didn't conquer you. They assimilated you. Your culture, your history, your art, it all became a forgotten whisper in the overwhelming chorus of their union. Peace, they promised, but it was the peace of the grave. The crew was divided. The prospect of the Echo was intoxicating. With it, we could finally stop looking over our shoulder. We could build, expand, and live without the constant, gnawing fear of annihilation. But the story of the luminocracy sounded like a ghost story, an overblown tale from a desperate people trying to sell us on their own value. Jian was adamant. It's a fairy tale designed to make the bait more appealing. He argued in my ready room, his hands clenched. They lead us in with a sob story. We take them aboard, and their luminocracy friends show up to welcome us into their silent choir. We have one rule: Ava trusts nothing. He was right. Of course. It was the rule that had kept us alive. But as I reviewed the Coral's data logs, the fragments of their history they had sent us, I saw something else. I saw star charts of their lost worlds, recordings of their songs, images of their beautiful, fragile cities being enveloped in a soft, inexorable white light. I saw the architectural plans for their ship, a vessel with no weapons, Not a single offensive system. We were a species that had forgotten what it was like to not build a weapon into everything we made. The coral had never even learned. "We offer them conditional aid," I announced on the bridge, the decision settling in my bones like a lead weight. "A small delegation. They can come aboard the Vengeance. We will hear them out, verify their claims. We stay at battle readiness. The second we detect anything, a single ship that isn't theirs, we open fire." Jian's jaw tightened, but he nodded. A crisp, professional gesture of dissent acknowledged and overruled. We transmitted the offer. The coral's reply was a song of cautious, hopeful joy. We guided their shuttle into our main hangar bay. It was a small, graceful craft, looking like a silver leaf next to our own brutish, angular assault craft. I met them at the airlock, flanked by 2 squads of Marines in full combat armor, their pulse rifles at the ready. 3 of the coral emerged. They were tall and impossibly slender, their bodies moving with a fluid grace that seemed to defy gravity. Their skin was the color of mother of pearl, shimmering with a faint internal luminescence. They had no visible eyes, no mouths in the human sense, but I could feel their gaze on me. A gentle, inquisitive pressure. Their leader, who communicated its name as Lyra, conveyed their message through a small, floating orb that translated their resonant frequencies into spoken words. "We thank you, Captain," the orb chimed, its voice a soft, melodic tenor. "Your light in the darkness is a gift." "We're not a gift," I replied, my tone flat and cold. "We're a fortress, and you're on the outside until you prove you don't mean to tear down the walls." We led them to the observation lounge. The armored shutters pulled back to reveal the star-dusted void. We sat at a sterile metal table, my officers and I on one side, the 3 silent, luminous beings on the other. Lyra began to tell their story, a tragic epic of a peaceful civilization that had encountered a seductive, all-consuming god. As they spoke of the hymn of union, a low hum suddenly vibrated through the deck plates. It was almost imperceptible at first, a subtle thrumming that I initially dismissed as a quirk in our aging life support, but it grew, and with it came a feeling, a sense of profound calm washing over me. The tension in my shoulders eased. The gnawing paranoia that had been my constant companion for decades began to feel distant, foolish. Across the table, the coral delegation froze. The light from their skin flickered erratically. "They have found us," Lyra's translator spoke, the melodic voice now laced with pure terror. "The hymn, it has begun." On the main view screen, a new star was born. A pinpoint of light at the edge of the system flared into existence, resolving into a shape that defied all principles of starship design. It was a cathedral of light and crystal, a structure of impossible, soaring architecture that pulsed with a gentle, inviting glow. It was beautiful, and it was terrifying. It didn't hail us. It didn't launch fighters. It just sang. The hum intensified, no longer just a sound, but a presence in our minds. It whispered of an end to struggle, an end to fear. It promised unity, a blissful merging with a consciousness that was vast and loving. On the bridge, I saw through the observation window that my crew was slowing down. The crisp, frantic energy of a potential first contact had evaporated, replaced by a languid sense of peace. My tactical officer, a young man named Reyes, who was usually a bundle of nervous energy, was staring at the cathedral with a look of rapturous awe. "It's beautiful," he murmured, his hands falling away from his console. The choral were in a state of panic. "They forced us." Lyra's orb blurted out, the words tumbling over each other. "Our distress signal, it was a beacon. They let us run, knowing we would lead them to new voices to add to the song. Forgive us." Forgiveness was a luxury I couldn't afford. The psychic pressure was immense, a warm, weighted blanket smothering my will to fight. It felt so easy to just let go, to accept the peace that was being offered. But I had been forged in the unification wars. I had seen entire habitats surrender to charismatic tyrants who promised peace and delivered slavery. I knew the allure of an easy end to pain. I fought it, dredging up every memory of fire, loss, and betrayal that had honed me into the weapon I was. The hymn faltered against the bulwark of my rage. "Jian," I roared, hearing the name tearing from my throat. "Raise the shields, charge the main cannon." Jian was struggling, his face pale and beaded with sweat, his knuckles white where he gripped the edge of his console. He was fighting it, too. But others weren't. Reyes, the serene smile still on his face, reached for the environmental controls. "No more walls," he whispered, his fingers dancing over the panel that would lower our shields. "We should welcome them." I didn't hesitate. I drew the heavy caliber pistol from my hip, the click of the safety disengaging echoing like a thunderclap in the suddenly quiet room. I leveled the barrel, not at the luminous aliens, not at the impossible ship on the view screen, but at the back of my own officer's head. "Reyes," I snarled, the hymn fighting to soften the edges of my voice. "Step away from the console." He didn't seem to hear me. His eyes were glazed over, lost in the cathedral's song. The war had come, just as Jian had predicted. But it wasn't a war of ships and guns. It was a war for our minds, for our very souls. And the first shot was about to be fired on my own bridge. The report of the pulse pistol was a flat, ugly sound, a syllable of pure violence that shattered the psychic harmony on the bridge. Rhea's serene expression didn't change as the high-energy round turned the back of his skull into a spray of red mist and bone fragments that painted the console in front of him. His body slumped forward, his quest for blissful union cut brutally short. For a heartbeat, there was only the ringing in my ears and the sight of my tactical officer's corpse. Then the spell broke. The bridge crew flinched back from the sound, from the sight of the kill, their eyes clearing with the shock of it. The gentle peace of the hymn was ripped away, replaced by the raw, jagged horror of a comrade's death. "Shields!" I bellowed into the sudden, horrified silence, my voice sounding like tearing metal. Now Yan, his face a grimace of pained clarity, slammed his palm onto his console. "Shields are up, power at 90%. The warm, inviting glow of the cathedral outside was suddenly filtered through the shimmering blue of our energy screens. The visual representation of a door slammed in the face of a god. The hum, the psychic pressure, lessened, but it was still there. A whisper at the edges of my mind, promising, cajoling, waiting for a moment of weakness. "Internal comms," I snapped, holstering my pistol. "I want a ship-wide lockdown. Seal every deck. Security teams, I want you armed and ready. Your orders are to incapacitate anyone, and I mean anyone, who is not at their post or is attempting to sabotage ship systems. Use lethal force if you have to. Acknowledge. The acknowledgments began to trickle in, hesitant at first, then firming up as the reality of the situation sank in. This wasn't an attack. It was an infection of the will, and I had just demonstrated the only cure I knew. I turned to the coral. They were huddled together, their pearlescent skin pulsing with a sickly, gray light. The orb that was Lyra's voice trembled. Your own. You killed your own. He was compromised, I said, my voice devoid of emotion. He was about to kill us all. Your luminocracy doesn't send soldiers. It turns our own people into weapons against us. My eyes swept the bridge, locking with every crew member, daring them to question the act, daring them to let the hymn find another purchase in their minds. Fear was a better motivator than bliss. Fear kept you alive. The reports started flooding in, and they were bad. In the engine room, 2 technicians had tried to vent the primary coolant, babbling about releasing the ship's spirit. In the hydroponics bay, a botanist had opened an outer airlock, content to be spaced into the great chorus. Security had stopped them, but not without casualties. We were fighting a civil war against a ghost, a war against the deepest, most exhausted parts of our own nature. We can't hold like this, Gian said, his voice low and strained. The shields are dampening the signal, but it's still getting through. It's like trying to block radiation with paper. How long until another officer decides to embrace the void? He was right. We were trapped in a metal box with a poison that attacked the mind. And the source of that poison was a crystalline monstrosity that could wait us out for eternity. I walked over to the Corel. You, I said to Lyra, my voice hard. You've faced them before. How do you fight it? How do you stop the song? The orb floated forward, its light dim. We do not, it replied, the melodic voice thick with despair. We sing our own songs, songs of memory, of loss. It is a shield of sorrow. It does not stop the hymn, but it reminds us of who we are, of what we stand to lose. It gives us the strength to run, but our song is fading, and we have nowhere left to run. A shield of sorrow. The words echoed in my mind. The hymn offered peace, an end to suffering. I had broken its hold on my bridge with an act of shocking violence. Pain was the antidote. Rage was the armor. Gian, I said, a new, terrible idea beginning to form. Patch me into the ship's historical archives. I want every file on the Unification Wars, every log from the fall of Earth. I want the plague records from the Mars colony, the famine on Ganymede, the riots on Io Station. I want every atrocity, every betrayal, every moment of screaming, blood-soaked agony our species has ever recorded. Gian stared at me, his eyes wide with a dawning horror. Ava, what are you planning? The choral fight the hymn with a song of sorrow, I explained, my voice chillingly calm. We're about to show them what a species forged in hell sounds like when it truly grieves. I turned back to Lyra. You can shape psychic resonance. Your songs aren't just sound, they're emotion, they're concepts. I'm going to give you the raw data, the unfiltered history of human suffering. I need you to turn it into a weapon. I need you to craft a song from it, a psychic broadcast that will drown out their hymn of union. Can you do it? The 3 choral looked at each other, their silent communion a ripple of disturbed light. The idea was clearly abhorrent to them, an act of profound violation. But then they looked past me, to the cathedral on the view screen, and I could feel their resolve harden. The hymn is a lie. Lyra's orb stated. It offers a false peace by erasing the pain that gives life meaning. We will not help you create a weapon of pain, Captain, but we will help you broadcast the truth. We will shape your history into a lament, a song of defiance that screams of the price of survival. It will be a terrible sound. Good, I said. Terrible is what we need. The next hour was a controlled descent into madness. While Jane and the engineering team worked to bypass every safety protocol on our communications array, rigging it to broadcast a high-frequency psychic signal through the entire ship, I sat with the Coral in the tactical room. We didn't speak. I just fed them the data. They watched the last broadcast from Earth as the oceans boiled and the skies burned. They witnessed the footage of brother fighting, brother in the zero-gravity battles of the Unification Wars. Bodies puffing and freezing in the silent vacuum. They listened to the audio logs of the first explorers to find the ruins of New Eden, a colony that had starved to death, resorting to cannibalism in its final, desperate days. I watched the light in their bodies shift and change as they absorbed our legacy of pain. Their pearlescent skin swirled with shades of bruised violet and blood red. They began to hum, a low, guttural sound that was nothing like the beautiful music they had sent us before. It was a chord of pure anguish, a harmony of loss so profound it made the teeth ache. The ship was groaning around us. The hymn was intensifying. The cathedral seemingly aware that its prey was resisting. More reports came in a fire in the lower decks, a breach in the primary life support loop, both acts of sabotage by crew members who had succumbed. My security teams were taking losses, forced to kill people they had shared meals with just hours before. The vengeance was bleeding from the inside out. The array is hot. Gian's voice crackled over the comm. We're bypassing the last of the governors. Once we throw this switch, Ava, every speaker, every screen, every terminal on this ship is going to broadcast. It might break them. It might break us. It's a price I'm willing to pay, I said, standing up. The Coral's humming had grown louder, their three voices weaving a complex, agonizing tapestry of sound. It wasn't just noise. It was the psychic weight of 1 billion deaths. The echo of every scream our species had ever uttered. It was the song of man, and it was the ugliest thing I had ever heard. Lyra, are you ready? I asked. The orb pulsed with a final, sorrowful light. We are. The lament is composed. We will shield the minds of your crew as best we can, but the truth of your past cannot be blunted. They will feel it all. I looked at Gene on the monitor. He was pale, his hand hovering over a large, glowing red switch on his console. I gave him a sharp nod. Do it, I commanded. Give them our song. He slammed his hand down. The lights on the bridge flickered. For a moment, there was a profound, absolute silence. Then, the screaming began. It didn't come from the speakers. It came from inside my own head. The sound was not a sound. It was a physical presence, an invasive force that bypassed the ears and drove straight into the core of my being. It was the wail of a mother holding her irradiated child, the guttural roar of a soldier watching his platoon get spaced, the final gurgling breath of a plague victim. It was every moment of human agony, compressed into a single, unbearable psychic chord. The Coral had not lied. They had crafted a lament, and it was a masterpiece of horror. On the bridge, my crew convulsed. They fell from their chairs, clutching their heads. their faces contorted in masks of pure anguish as 1,000 generations of inherited trauma washed over them. I felt it too, a phantom pain that was both alien and intimately familiar. I saw flashes of my own past, the burning husk of my childhood home on the orbital station Providence, the face of my first captain as he died in my arms during the siege of Ceres, the cold, hard decision to jettison a damaged escape pod full of civilians to save my own ship. The lament took my personal grief and amplified it with the sorrow of our entire species. But beneath the pain, there was something else, a current of incandescent rage. The hymn of union offered a gentle, painless oblivion. Our lament was a furious, screaming refusal to be forgotten. It was the sound of a species that had been kicked, beaten, and broken, and had gotten back up every single time, spitting blood and defiance. It was a declaration: our pain is our own. Our history is our own. You cannot have it. I forced myself to my feet, my muscles screaming in protest, my vision swimming with phantom images of war and famine. The coral were at the center of the room, their bodies now glowing with a fierce, almost violent, crimson light. They were the conductors of this orchestra of despair, focusing the raw, chaotic energy of our history into a coherent, directed broadcast. Through the observation window, I saw the cathedral. Its soft, inviting glow had faltered. It was flickering, the crystalline structure seeming to warp and distort as if in response to a dissonant, painful noise. Our sorrow was hurting it. "Jian," I managed to grit out, my voice a raw croak. "Weapons target the cathedral's core. Give me a firing solution through the psychic storm." I saw Jian drag himself back into his chair. His face was a mess of tears and sweat, but his eyes burned with a cold fire I had never seen before. He had seen the truth of our past, unfiltered, and it had not broken him. It had forged him into something harder. "Targeting solution acquired," he snarled, his voice a low growl. "Main cannon is charged to 100%. The lament is interfering with their shields. They're vulnerable." "Fire," I commanded. The vengeance shuddered as the main cannon discharged. A lance of pure, coherent energy. A spear forged from the heart of a captive star, shot across the void. It struck the cathedral dead center. There was no explosion. Not in the traditional sense. The crystalline structure didn't shatter. It curdled. The beautiful sinus geometric patterns dissolved into a chaotic, ugly mess. The inviting light turned a sickly, bruised purple. The hymn in our minds stuttered, its promise of peace fracturing into shards of psychic static and confusion. The cathedral began to retreat. It didn't turn or engage its engines. It simply seemed to shrink, folding in on itself, its impossible architecture collapsing as it withdrew into the non-space from which it had come. In a final flash of corrupted light, it was gone. The silence that descended on the bridge was more profound than the noise that had preceded it. The lament cut off abruptly, leaving behind a ringing void. The crew lay scattered across the deck, groaning, weeping, slowly pulling themselves back from the abyss of our collective memory. The war was over, for now. I walked over to the coral. Their crimson glow had faded, leaving them looking drained and translucent. The orb that was Lyra's voice was dim, its light barely a flicker. "It is done," it whispered, the melodic voice now cracked and weary. "We have shown them your truth. They will not return." The song of your species. It is too sharp, too painful. They cannot assimilate it. They can only flee from it. A wave of exhaustion, so profound it was almost physical, washed over me. We had won. We had faced a psychic god and made it bleed, but the cost was steep. I looked at the faces of my crew. They were not the same people who had stood on this bridge an hour ago. They had stared into the heart of human darkness, and it had stared back. The naive awe in Reyes's eyes before he died seemed like a relic from another era. We were a crew of ghosts now, haunted by the memories of a species that had survived by being more monstrous than the things that hunted it. The next few days were a blur of damage control and psychological triage. We had lost 17 crew members to the hymn's influence, either through sabotage or suicide. Dozens more were in the medbay, catatonic or suffering from acute psychological trauma. The lament had saved the ship, but it had scarred every soul aboard. We held a memorial service in the main hangar, a silent, somber affair. There were no speeches, no platitudes. We just stood before the 17 empty coffins, each of us lost in the echoes of the song we had unleashed. During the service, Jian came to stand beside me. "The Coral are requesting permission to depart," he said quietly. "Their ship is partially repaired. They say their presence on the Vengeance is a painful reminder." I understood. We were their saviors. But we were also the source of the terrible song they had been forced to sing. Our very existence was a testament to a kind of survival they found abhorrent. "Grant them permission," I said. "Give them whatever supplies they need. See them off personally." I met with Lyra one last time in the observation lounge. The armored shutters were open again, revealing the cold, indifferent stars. The Coral were still pale, still weary, but a measure of their luminous grace had returned. "You are leaving," I stated. It wasn't a question. "Yes," the orb replied. "Our path lies elsewhere. We seek a place where no songs of pain are needed. We thank you for our lives. Captain Rostova, you fought a monster and won. That monster was going to absorb you, erase everything you are," I countered, a defensive edge to my voice. "And you fought it by embracing everything that you are," Lyra responded, a note of profound sadness in its tone. "Your rage, your sorrow, your capacity for violence, you did not defeat the darkness. You showed it a darker reflection of itself. We hope, for your sake, that you do not become what you fought." The orb then floated over to the table and projected a stream of data onto a waiting slate. "This is the echo," it said. "The technology we promised you. A way to hide, to be silent. Perhaps it will give you the peace you have never known." With a final, silent nod of what might have been respect or pity. The three Coral turned and glided out of the room. I watched their small, elegant ship detach from our hull and disappear into the void. A single, hopeful note in a silent, empty universe. I picked up the data slate, the echo, the prize we had risked everything for. I took it to Jian in the engine room. He and the engineering team were gathered around a diagnostic panel, their faces grim. "What is it?" I asked, seeing the tension in the room. "It's the main cannon," Jian said, not looking up from his screen. "When we fired on the cathedral, we had to bypass every safety protocol. We pushed the core far beyond its operational limits. The containment field is fluctuating, It's unstable. My blood ran cold. The heart of our ship, our greatest weapon, was a ticking time bomb. "Can you fix it?" I asked, my voice tight. Gene finally looked at me, and in his eyes, I saw weariness that mirrored my own. "I don't know. Ava," he said. "The technology is centuries old, a relic from a forgotten age. We've been patching it together with scavenged parts and sheer luck for decades. This time we may have finally broken it for good." I stood there, the data slate containing the key to our salvation in one hand, the reality of our imminent self-destruction in the other. We had driven off the alien god, but it seemed the ghosts of our own past, in the form of our decaying, overstressed technology, might be the thing that finally killed us. The irony was so thick I could have choked on it. We had a way to hide from the universe, but we might not have a ship left to hide. The Vengeance, the last bastion of humanity, was dying, and it was threatening to take us all with it. The Vengeance had always been a noisy ship, a constant symphony of groaning metal, hissing pipes, and the thrum of the overworked life support. But now, a new sound had joined the chorus, a low, dissonant hum that emanated from the engine room, a sickly counterpoint to the familiar sounds of home. It was the sound of the containment field for the main cannon's power core, a magnetic bottle holding back a miniature, angry star. And it was failing. Every flicker of the lights, every shudder in the deck plates, was a fresh reminder that we were living on the edge of a self-inflicted apocalypse. The mood on the ship was grim. The victory against the Luminocracy felt hollow, a Pyrrhic triumph that had cost us our future. We were adrift, a wounded animal bleeding in the dark, and the sharks were circling. Without the main cannon, we were just a large, slow-moving target. Every pirate clan, every scavenger fleet in the sector would see us as a prize to be taken, a metal whale ready for the slaughter. I spent my days in the engine room with Gian and his team. The space was a hellish cathedral of aging technology, filled with the smell of ozone and hot metal. Gene, his face permanently smudged with grease, his eyes red-rimmed from lack of sleep, had become the high priest of our dying god. He and his acolytes moved with a grim, desperate reverence around the core's housing, a massive, armored sphere that pulsed with a faint, unhealthy green light. "It's a cascade failure," he told me, his voice a flat, exhausted monotone as he pointed to a flickering schematic on a holographic display. "The primary emitters are shot. We're running on the secondary and tertiary backups, but they're not designed for a sustained load. They're cracking under the strain. Every time one fails, it puts more pressure on the others. It's a domino effect." "How long do we have?" I asked, the question I had been asking every day for a week. "Best guess a month, maybe 2, he replied, not meeting my eyes. "Worst guess, the next time the ship's cat sneezes too hard, the field could collapse at any moment." He ran a hand through his matted hair. "There's only one way to fix it. Ava, we need a new emitter array. And there's only one place in this God's forsaken sector of space where we might find one of those Ragnarok." The name landed in the room with the force of a physical blow. Ragnarok, the graveyard of ships, the final, lawless frontier. It was a chaotic accretion disk of stellar debris, wrecked starships, and failed colonies orbiting a collapsed neutron star. It was a place where the desperate and the damned went to pick through the bones of the past, a pirate haven ruled by a loose confederation of warlords and scavengers. Going to Ragnarok was a death sentence for most. But for us, Staying put was a guaranteed one. "We have the Echo," I said, the data slate from the Coral feeling heavy in my hand. "We could install it, find a quiet corner of the galaxy, and disappear." Gene finally looked at me, a bitter, humorless smile twisting his lips. "And do what? Eve alive, out our days on a crippled ship, waiting for the core to breach. The Echo can hide us from sensors, but it can't fix a shattered engine. It's a cloak, not a miracle. We need the parts, and that means going to Ragnarok." He was right. Hiding was just a slower way to die. We had to fight for our survival. One last time. I gave the order. The Vengeance, groaning in protest, turned its nose towards the one place in the universe we had always sworn to avoid. As we approached the system, the ship's sensors were flooded with a chaotic wash of signals. The debris field was so dense it created a constant storm of gravitic and electromagnetic interference. It was like flying into a hurricane made of scrap metal and radiation. Dean had to take the helm himself, his hands flying over the controls with a practiced grace as he navigated the treacherous currents of the graveyard. "We're being hailed," the communications officer announced, his voice tight. It's the Breaker Queen." Another name that carried weight, the Breaker Queen. A woman named Kaelin was the de facto ruler of Ragnarok, a former coalition naval engineer who had gone rogue during the Unification Wars. She had carved out an empire for herself in the wreckage. She was brilliant, ruthless, and she controlled the only functioning dry dock and parts repository in the system, a massive, jury-rigged station called the Anvil. If we wanted the emitter array, we had to go through her. "On screen," I commanded. The image that appeared was of a woman in her late 50s, her face a roadmap of hard living, her graying hair cut in a severe, practical style. She sat on a throne made from the command chair of a derelict dreadnought, and behind her, the chaotic, bustling interior of the Anvil was visible. She had a cybernetic arm, a sleek, chrome prosthetic that she polished with an oily rag as she spoke. "Captain Eva Rostova of the HCS Vengeance," she said, her voice a low, gravelly purr. "I thought your kind had better sense than to come slumming in my backyard. You're a long way from home. We need parts." "Queen Kaelin," I said, dispensing with the pleasantries. "A specific component for a Coalition-era Titan cannon. We're prepared to trade." She laughed, a harsh, metallic sound. "Trade, honey. You're flying the biggest prize to enter the system in a decade, a fully stocked, operational warship. You don't have anything I want. You are what I want. The ship is not for sale," I said, my voice hardening. "And it's not as operational as you think. If you try to take it, you'll be the proud owner of a new, very bright, very radioactive nebula where your station used to be." Her eyes, sharp and intelligent, narrowed. "A bluff." "Is it?" I countered. "The core that powers our main cannon is unstable. That's why we're here. We have maybe a month before it goes critical. If you force our hand, we all die. If you help us, we can make you very, very rich." I had her attention. I laid out the offer. We would give her the Echo, the ability to hide her entire station, her entire fleet, from the rest of the galaxy. She could become a true ghost, a phantom queen ruling an invisible kingdom. For a pirate lord, it was the ultimate prize. She was silent for a long time, her cybernetic fingers tapping a slow, thoughtful rhythm on the arm of her throne. The component you need is rare, she said finally. An Isotope 7 emitter array. Haven't seen one of those in years, but I know where one is. There's a derelict warship, the Persephone, lodged in the upper debris field, a sister ship to the Vengeance, lost in the final days of the war. Her core is dead, but her cannon assembly should be intact. So you'll give us the location, I asked. Oh, I'll do better than that, she said with a predatory smile. I'll give you a guide. But the Persephone is in contested territory. It's infested. My price is the Echo, and you have to clear out the nest for me. Infested with what? Jian asked from beside me. The Breaker Queen's smile widened. Scrappers, she said, the word dripping with contempt. Not the organized kind, like us. These are feral, cannibals, cultists, things that have been living in the wrecks for too long. They call themselves the Children of the Void. They worship the neutron star, believe it's a hungry god. They'll strip a ship to the bone in hours, and the crew along with it. The Persephone is their holy temple. The choice was simple. There was no choice. We had to go. The Breaker Queen sent us a guide, a wiry, twitchy man named Corbin, who had a network of optical sensors where his eyes should have been. He came aboard with a small, heavily armed escort, and their presence on the Vengeance was a constant, low-grade source of tension. They were scavengers. Their armor a patchwork of different designs. Their weapons customized and deadly. They looked at my crew with a mixture of pity and hunger. Corbin guided us through the labyrinthine wreckage with a pilot's skill, his multi-lensed eyes tracking a dozen different threats at once. The children are fanatics, he explained as we neared the Persephone's location. They don't fight to win. They fight to die. They see it as an offering to the void. They'll ram their ships into you, blow themselves up on your hull. Anything to take you with them. The Persephone was a ghost. She was floating in a section of the debris field so thick it was like a forest of twisted metal trees. She was dark, silent, and covered in a strange, crystalline growth that pulsed with a faint, bioluminescent light. And she was not alone. Small, spidery ships, cobbled together from scrap and hope, swarmed around her like insects on a carcass. The Children of the Void. They detected us almost immediately. A wave of angry, incoherent threats filled our comms channel, a chorus of zealots screaming about defiling their holy ground. Then they attacked. It wasn't a battle. It was a brawl. Their ships were fast and suicidal. 2 of them slammed into our port side, their makeshift explosive charges tearing ugly gashes in our outer hull. Our point defense cannons, designed to track and destroy missiles and fighters, struggled to target the erratic, unpredictable movements of the cultist ships. "They're boarding," the security officer yelled. "Deck 7 aft section." I had to lead the defense myself. I grabbed a pulse rifle and led a team of Marines into the breached section. The corridor was a nightmare of smoke, sparking conduits, and the high-pitched shriek of escaping atmosphere. The Children of the Void were exactly as Corbin had described. They were clad in rags and scavenged armor, their faces painted with glowing, bioluminescent symbols. They fought with a terrifying, ecstatic ferocity, wielding crude, sharpened pieces of metal and salvaged energy weapons. We fought them corridor by corridor, a brutal, close-quarters slugfest. They didn't retreat. They didn't surrender. We had to kill every last one of them. In the end, we pushed them back, sealing the breach. But we had lost 6 Marines. Back on the bridge, the situation was no better. "They've latched onto the hull," Gian reported, his face grim. "They're cutting their way in at multiple points. We can't hold them off forever." "We don't have to," I said, my mind racing. "We just need the emitter array. Corbin, can we get a team onto the Persephone?" The scavenger's optical sensors whirred as he studied the tactical display. "It'll be a one-way trip," he said. "Their ships are blocking any direct approach. You'd have to launch a boarding pod through the thick of them. Getting in might be possible. Getting out, not so much." "Then we make it a one-way trip," I said, my decision made. "Gian, you have the bridge. Repel boarders. Keep the ship in one piece. I'm taking a team to the Persephone. We get that array. Or we die trying." I was going to board a ghost ship, infested with religious fanatics, to steal the heart of a dead cannon, all while my own ship was being torn apart around me. It was a suicide mission. It was also our only hope. The Vengeance was my ship, and I would not let her die quietly in the dark. I would tear the solution from the jaws of hell itself if I had to. The boarding pod was a cramped, claustrophobic metal coffin, and the ride over to the Persephone was a 10-minute exercise in controlled terror. The pod, affectionately nicknamed the Tin Can, bucked and rattled as Yan expertly piloted the Vengeance through the swarm of cultist ships, drawing their fire, creating a fleeting window for our insertion. Through the pod's tiny viewport, I saw the battle unfold in strobing flashes of weapon fire and violent, silent explosions. It was a ballet of chaos, and we were a single or desperate pirouette through the heart of it. My team was small, hand-picked for their skill and their grim acceptance of the odds. There was Sergeant Maddox, a hulking bear of a man whose loyalty was as unshakable as his aim with a heavy pulse cannon. Beside him was Ilara, a former Black Ops slicer who could coax a dead machine into singing its secrets. And then there was Corbin, the Breaker Queen's guide, his multi-lensed eyes constantly scanning, processing the storm outside with a detached, machine-like calm. The rest of the 12-person team were hardened Marines, their faces set like stone behind their helmet visors. "Impact in 30 seconds, Ilara announced, her voice a steady presence in our helmet comms. "Breaching charges are hot. I'm reading the Persephone's atmosphere as thin but breathable. Heavy radiation, though. Keep your suits sealed." The impact was a jarring, teeth-rattling boom that threw us against our restraints. The explosive bolts on the pod's nose fired, and with a shriek of tortured metal, we punched through the Persephone's weakened outer hull. The pod's interior was filled with the acrid smell of burnt metal and the hiss of pressurizing gas. "We're in," Maddox growled, already unstrapping himself and hefting his cannon. "Let's go greet the welcoming committee." The welcome was a hail of projectile weapons fired from makeshift barricades down the corridor. The children of the void were waiting for us. They weren't soldiers. They were zealots, and they fought with a terrifying lack of self-preservation. We pushed forward, a disciplined wedge of armor and firepower against their chaotic, suicidal charges. Maddox's cannon was a roaring beast, tearing through their flimsy cover, while the rest of us laid down a steady, methodical curtain of pulse fire. "The cannon assembly is on the command deck, 5 levels up," Corbin directed, his optical sensors cutting through the smoke and strobing emergency lights. "We need to get to the central conduit. It'll be the fastest way." The ship was a tomb. The corridors were choked with debris, and the strange, crystalline growths we had seen from the outside. The bodies of the Persephone's original crew were still here and there, frozen in the last moments of their lives. Their vacuum-preserved corpses now serving as grim, silent statues in this desecrated temple. The children had turned the ship into a charnel house, their fanatical symbols painted in blood and bioluminescent fluid on every wall. We fought our way to the central conduit, a massive vertical shaft that ran the length of the ship. The gravity was intermittent, flickering on and off as the ship's dying power systems spasmed. We used our suit thrusters to navigate the treacherous ascent, fighting off ambushes from cultists who seemed to appear from the very walls, their spidery forms skittering along the pipes and conduits. By the time we reached the command deck, we were down to 8. The cost of every level had been paid in blood. The bridge of the Persephone was a ghostly echo of the Vengeance's own. The layout was the same, but here everything was dead. The view screen was cracked, showing a static, frozen image of the battle that had killed the ship centuries ago. At the center of the room, on the captain's throne, sat a skeletal figure in a tattered command uniform, the captain who had gone down with his ship. But the command deck wasn't empty. A new figure stood before the throne, a high priest of this insane cult. He was tall and gaunt, draped in ragged robes, his face a canvas of ritualistic scars. He held a glowing piece of the crystalline growth like a scepter. He did not attack. He simply watched us, a serene, knowing smile on his face. "The unbelievers have come," he said, his voice a dry, rustling whisper that echoed in the dead air. "You seek to steal the heart of our temple, but the void has already claimed it. It has claimed us all." Behind him, the housing for the main cannon's power core began to glow, the light pulsing in time with the thrumming of the neutron star outside. Elara was already at a console, her fingers flying as she bypassed the ancient security locks. "I'm in," she said, her voice strained. "The emitter array is intact. But, oh, hell, they've integrated their bioluminescent fungus into the power conduits. It's feeding on the residual radiation, growing into the system. If I try to extract the array, the feedback loop could overload the entire deck." "Then we're not extracting it," I said. My eyes locked on the high priest. "We're taking the whole damn assembly. Maddox, Corbin, get some charges on the support struts. We're blowing it free." The high priest laughed, a dry, rattling sound. "The void protects its own," he hissed, and from the shadows, a dozen more cultists emerged, their eyes glowing with the same fanatical light. The fight was brutal. While Maddox and Corbin worked to plant the charges, the rest of us formed a defensive perimeter, a desperate last stand on the bridge of a dead ship. I fought with a cold, focused rage, my pulse rifle a part of me. I saw the high priest raise his crystalline scepter, and a wave of psychic energy, a faint, ugly echo of the luminocracy's hymn, washed over me. It wasn't a song of peace. It was a screech of nihilistic despair, a promise of the blissful emptiness of the void. I fought it, my mind a fortress built of the Vengeance's lament, the memory of our own pain a shield against his. I saw him falter, his eyes widening in surprise as I pushed through his psychic attack. I raised my rifle and put a single, clean shot through his chest. "Charges are set," Maddox yelled. "Get back to the pod," I ordered. Now we fell back, dragging our wounded, leaving the bridge to the dead and the dying. We piled into the tin can, the inner door groaning shut just as the first of the cultists reached it. "Ilara, blow it." I gasped, my lungs burning. She hit the detonator. A low boom shuddered through the Persephone's hull. We fired the pod's thrusters, pulling away from the dying warship. Behind us, the entire command deck of the Persephone tore loose from the rest of the ship, a massive chunk of metal containing the prize we had come for. The journey back was a desperate race. Jan, with a stroke of tactical genius, had led the cultist fleet on a chase around the larger asteroids in the debris field, but they were circling back. We had one shot at this. We used the pod's magnetic grapples to latch onto the drifting command deck, and with our own thrusters firing at maximum, we began the slow, agonizing process of dragging our prize back towards the Vengeance. We made it. Barely. The Vengeance's hangar bay doors opened like the jaws of a savior, and we guided our salvage inside just as the ship's last point defense cannon sputtered and died. The doors sealed behind us, and, for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, there was silence. The work that followed was frantic and miraculous. Gene and his team, with Ilara's help, managed to interface the new emitter array with our own failing systems. It was a Frankenstein's monster of a repair, a hybrid of two dead ships brought back to life. But as the sickly green glow of our core faded, replaced by a steady, healthy blue, a ragged cheer went up in the engine room. We paid the Breaker Queen her price. We transmitted the full data package for the Echo, and, true to her word, she let us go, even giving us a parting gift of extra fuel and supplies. As we left Ragnarok, I saw on the long-range sensors as the Anvil and the surrounding fleet simply vanished. Cloaked in the silence the Coral had given us, we were alive. We were whole. The Vengeance was no longer dying, as we plotted a course for the unknown, for a quiet, empty sector where we could finally rest and rebuild. I stood on the bridge, the new, steady hum of the engines a comforting song beneath my feet. I looked at my crew, scarred, haunted, but alive and whole. We were not the same people who had entered this crucible. We had faced gods and ghosts, zealots and pirates. We had looked into the abyss of our own history and had not flinched. The galaxy was still a dark, predatory place. But for the first time, we had a choice. We had the Echo, a way to hide, and we had the Vengeance, a weapon to defend ourselves. We were no longer just survivors. We were the masters of our own fate, the song of humanity. Once a lament of pain and sorrow, was now a quiet, steady anthem of defiance. We had earned our silence, and in that silence, we would finally build a future.